Hello Internet, this is Olin from What I Am Listening To. Well, here we are. It is now the new year. It is 2025. And with the new year brings my annual shopping spree at Amoeba Music in the beautiful city of Berkeley. I don't get to make it to the Berkeley store often, and every time I go there, I always find tons and tons and tons of stuff that I never see at my home store in San Francisco. Some things I've never heard of and will take a chance on. Some things I've been looking for. Whatever the reason, I'm excited to go there and see what they have. And I have been stockpiling on credit for the entirety of the month. And thanks to family and friends and selling stuff, I have a grand total of $410 in credit to spend. Probably the most amount of money I've ever brought with me to go on this shopping spree. I don't know if I'll spend it all in one sitting. I kinda hope I don't, because that would be a little crazy. But who's to say? We won't know until we get there, so I'd say let's waste no more time and let's get this show on the road.
82 kilometers later.
Okay, so I've just parked here in Berkeley. I got rid of the beanie, got rid of the glasses. I am about to go inside and embark on some hardcore shopping. I am not going to film inside the store because I don't feel like it, but when I come back, I'm gonna have a bag full of CDs.
Many hours later.
So do you remember when I said that I probably wouldn't spend all $400 at Berkeley? I don't know if I'll spend it all in one sitting. I kinda hope I don't, because that would be a little crazy. Well, not only did I do that, but I went a bit over, and the total was about $500. I ended up paying $88 from pocket on a big old bag of CDs. Now, normally, I would be pretty excited about that. I am, but I'm also conflicted because, holy shit, dude. I just spent $500 on CDs. What the fuck? So, I'm going to take a moment to process all of this and drive home, and then I will show off everything I bought because that's the video. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Let's just go home.
24 hours later.
Okay, so I am now back home, and it may or may not be a day later since I went shopping. But honestly, I had to process the sheer amount of stuff that I brought home. This is my receipt, looking like a CVS receipt. It's the longest I've ever had an Amoeba receipt before. This is absolutely mental. I almost feel like I should just keep this for the sake of memories. We'll see. I have a lot to go through in this bag full of CDs. And for the sake of time and making editing this thing a lot easier, I'm not even going to include clips of songs from each album I talk about, because then I'll have to rip every single CD onto my computer and pick like 2 or 3 songs to include. It's just far too much work. So this video, I'm literally going to just show each CD one by one, talk about it, and move on. So I guess let's just waste no more time and let's dive into this. How the fuck do I want to do this? I suppose I'll start with the new, because there isn't as much new as there is used. But as far as new thingies go, we'll start with Wilco. This is Wilco's newest EP, actually, Hot Sun Cool Shroud. This was an EP the band released in the summertime, hence the title. It is all themed around summer. and also with songs like Hot Sun and Ice Cream. I mostly got this because I didn't have it, and if you know me, you'll know that I am a massive Wilco fan. And I'll be honest, I have not listened to this as extensively as I have with other Wilco releases. But at this point, I just buy anything Wilco puts out on CD. Okay, next up, I have Olivia Rodrigo's album Guts, but it's a special version called Guts Spilled. Now, this is actually something I was very surprised to see on CD. So, Olivia Rodrigo released her album Guts, and then later on, she released a deluxe version called Guts Spilled, which included a bunch of bonus songs. And for a time, it only seemed like Guts Spilled was available on vinyl as far as physical versions went, which is annoying as a CD lover, just because I didn't want to have to spend an outrageous amount of money on a double or triple LP set just to have bonus songs. But instead, I spent a bunch of money on a Japanese CD of Guts Spilled. I guess Guts Spilled only got a CD release in Japan, which I find really weird. But hey, Amoeba Berkeley had a copy, so I picked it up. I mostly bought this because my wife really wanted this on CD. For the longest time, she was really disappointed that it seemed like Guts Spilled was only an LP thing, but it is a CD thing, and now we have it. I'm not sure if this will eventually get a proper US release. We will see. Even if it does, I think owning this version is really cool because it's got the Japanese Obi strip, it's got this Japanese hype sticker. Just seems like a fun version to have. Next up, I have an MJ Lenderman CD. This is his album Ghost of Your Guitar Solo. I mostly bought this because MJ Lenderman is really popular now thanks to his most recent album, which I also own and also love. But admittedly, I have not listened to any of his other solo albums apart from that one. I remember when the previous solo album came out, who has a name that is escaping me, but it's got like a black cover with a black motorcycle and him wearing black motorcycle attire. But that was the second album. This is apparently his first album, which again, I did not know existed until I saw it in the store. So I grabbed it. We'll see how it sounds. Getting into unknown territory here. Next up, I have this really cool compilation I don't know a single thing about. I just thought the cover looked really cool. And it has the tagline Early Electronic Rye, 1983 to 1990. Non-American 80s electronica music always sounds appealing to me. And this seems to be a collection of Algerian 80s electronica music, which again, sounds really cool. Considering I had a lot of credit to spend, I just thought, why not? Let's check this out. And the last new title I got, this was actually the last thing I grabbed before finally checking out. Amoeba Berkeley has this amazing section called iRock, which is short for International Rock. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's rock music from all places of the world, both new and old. In fact, a good amount of the stuff I have purchased came from that section because there was just so much cool and interesting stuff that was filed there. But this caught my eye, again, because the cover looked really cool. And it also had this nifty little descriptor to it. Cool new 2024 LP by this Swiss duo on Bongo Joe. Trippy stuff. I believe the band is called Citron. Not entirely sure. I just know I liked the aesthetic of this cover. The description sounded interesting. I had the credit, so I got it. Okay, let's move on to the used stuff. And I think it might be easy if I just take stuff out in piles here. Here we go. Okay, first of the used, I have a blonde Redhead album. This is Fake Can Be Just As Good. Now, I'm a bit more familiar with Blonde Redhead's later stuff when they started doing more dream pop shoegazy stuff. The earlier material is a complete mystery to me. I know that they were signed on to Touch and Go at one point, and Guy Picciotto from Fugazi produced some of those early records. Oh yeah, this one's actually on Touch and Go now that I talk about it. I mostly bought this CD thanks to my bandmate. He was talking about how he was obsessively listening to the song Water and looking for inspiration when it came to writing guitar riffs. So as a way to try to channel his wavelength, I started listening to the song, and I ended up really liking it too. It was punchy but melodic in the way I know Blonde Redhead for sounding like, but the edge to it was different, which was intriguing to me. Berkeley had the CD in stock for a mere $4.99, so I thought, why not? Let's listen to the whole album. Next up, I have an Eluvium CD. This is one called Piano Works. I always seem to leave with an Eluvium CD every time I visit Berkeley, but I'm particularly happy about this version because it's a 2-disc version. So I remember when this first came out, must have been, 2019, and it was released as both a single disc and a double disc version. The single disc version was the one that the San Francisco store would get, which was a bummer to me because I knew that the 2-disc version existed and that's the one I wanted. So I held off on getting it for the longest time, and then eventually I just kind of forgot about it. But Berkeley had the 2-disc version for only $7.99, which is a steal in my eyes. I feel like people sleep on Eluvium, which is a shame because he makes some of the best ambient music I've ever heard. And as the title says, it's all piano music, which is quite nice. It sounds a lot like the works of Eric Satie or even the Minecraft soundtrack, minus the electronics added. All right, next up, I have a bunch here. I have 4 CDs, all by different artists, but I'm going to talk about them together because my friend and coworker Ken is the reason why I have them. We went into the reggae section, and he was talking to me about how they just had stocked up on some stellar reggae CDs that you never see. And he essentially said that these CDs in his mind are like his top 10 favorite reggae CDs of all time that everybody should own. So he just shoved them in my basket and said, get these, and I just went with it. And don't get me wrong, I didn't do it just to be nice. I do actually like reggae. The thing is, though, is I just don't know it as well as him because there is so much of it. I have a couple reggae CDs in my collection, but these should be good introductions, especially if it's coming from someone who is an expert at them. Just for the sake of getting closer looks, we have a Max Romeo CD, we have Hugh Mundell CD, we have, what is this one? We have the Mighty Diamons, and we have Abyssinians, I think is how you say that. It's pronounced the Abyssinians. I'm so sorry. Yeah, 4 CDs, all with cool covers, and all apparently very, 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 very good. So I am excited to explore these and broaden my horizons on reggae music. Next up, this is actually one I'm really stoked about finding. This is a band called The Naked Lights. This is a CD that I've actually been trying to get for quite some time now. I saw this band live when they opened for, I believe it was Wand, years and years and years ago. Which is kind of funny because Wand is a very different sounding band to these guys. I think they're local to the area. Hang on, I'm gonna look that up. Yeah, they're from Oakland, so of course they were on the bill. But yeah, when I saw them, they were stellar. Unlike Juan's heavy psychedelic rock sound, these guys were more no-wave art punk. Just very chaotic and angular, not entirely melodic, but still really cool. So happy to finally be adding this to my collection. It has been a long time coming, and I couldn't believe it was only $6.99. Next up, I got another twofer here. I have 2 CDs that I've also been looking for a long time. This is a band called Peroshka. This band is really interesting because they're more or less like a dream pop shoegaze supergroup. It features one of the lead vocalists from the band Lush, the guitarist from the band Moose, the drummer from the band Elastica, and the bassist from the Modern English. They just sounded so cool when I first discovered them. At this point, these are the only 2 albums that they've done, and again, I've been on the hunt for them for a while. I've never seen them at the San Francisco store, and wouldn't you know it, Berkeley had them both. Next up, I have another world comp, something else I'm taking a chance on. German Synthwave Underground, 1980 to 1985. I mean, come on. That just sounds so cool. And an equally cool, kind of dark, but somewhat colorful looking album cover. I could not resist. I just had to get this. Here's something else I've been looking for a while. This is a Patrick Cowley CD. This is his album, Megatron Man. Patrick Cowley was an amazing high-energy dance electronica musician who was from San Francisco. He's made tons and tons of great music and has even collaborated with singers like Sylvester, which seems very appropriate. He even did music for gay erotica films, which is hilarious, but the music is also really stellar. But sadly, he was someone who passed away at a very early age due to complications of AIDS. A lot of his back catalog has been released over the years on Dark Entries, which is amazing. But this is actually one of his earlier albums and one that I've been looking for quite some time, and I was stoked to find a copy. And it's just nice to have more Patrick Cowley in my collection because I love his stuff and you should check his stuff out. It is brilliant. Next up, I have an EP. This is a Bark Psychosis EP called Manman. I love these guys. They are one of the best first wave post-rock bands to ever exist. They only have 2 full-length albums, one that came out sometime in the 90s and one that came out way later in the 2000s. But this is an EP that I'd never seen before that was released in 1992, so I had to get it. Anyone who's a fan of the later Talk records should definitely check these guys out. They are phenomenal. This should be a really fun listen. I'm excited to explore it. Next up, I have yet another twofer. These are 2 CDs I found in the electronica section, specifically under a tab called Happy Hardcore. Now, Happy Hardcore is kind of a weird subgenre to describe. It's very much influenced by the hardcore electronica and gabber scenes from the UK in the 90s. But I guess there's other elements to it that make it different than said genres, which I honestly don't know how to describe. I just know Happy Hardcore as a label, and that's it. And I've never seen Happy Hardcore CDs until I went to Amoeba Berkeley, and sure enough, they had like 4 or 5 there, all of which were like $19.99 a piece, which is kind of crazy. But I ended up picking out these 2. This one is specifically Japanese Happy Hardcore, and this one just looked cool. I thought the cover looked cool. I guess it's a sampler for a label called Illegal Wave Records. So yeah, I really don't know what to expect. I'm really fascinated by hardcore electronica. There's so much of it that I don't know. So I think listening to these will be kind of educational, but also I'm just looking forward to hearing some bonkers electronica. Next up, I have another thing I don't know anything about. This is a band called Cobra Strike, which I found filed in where Buckethead's CDs would be. I'm a huge fan of Buckethead and have been amassing a good amount of his CDs from his extensive discography. But again, I don't know a single thing about this project. I know he's in the band because you can see him on the cover there. Apart from his solo albums, I know he has a ton of other one-off bands and bands he just played in over the years, some of which I've heard and like, and some of which I've heard and don't like as much. But something about the aesthetic of this cover seems very much in line with a Buckethead album. Kind of psychedelic. It's got a snake on the cover. It's got the KFC logo on it. It's got Ultraman also. It just looks fun and cool. And again, I love Buckethead, so I'm excited to listen to this one. Okay, next up, I have a numero group thing. This is a Codeine album called What About the Lonely? The numero group lately has been dipping their toes in emo and slowcore and putting out a ton of great albums by bands that some of which are more well-known than others. Guys like Duster, guys like Bedhead, guys like Karate, and guys like Codeine. I actually already have the 2 other albums Codeine has put out on CD, but I did not own this one. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this is a live album, which should be interesting to hear. If it's as good as the live Bedhead album that the numero group put out, then I'm sure I will like this. It's also priced at $20, which is leading me to believe that this CD is already out of print, which just seems kind of crazy to me. Next up, this is something that I've also been looking for a while and excited to have found. This is a Sandy Bull CD, Fantasias for Guitar and Banjo. There is a fantastic experimental compilation called Harmony of the Spheres, and on that compilation there is a Roy Montgomery track that pays homage to this album. The title of said Roy Montgomery track is called Fantasia on a Theme by Sandy Bull, which for the longest time I thought was a cover of 1 or 2 songs from this CD. I now know that Roy Montgomery was not actually covering any of the songs that are on here. I think he was just paying homage to Sandy Bull and was just heavily influenced by this album. So because of that, I have been trying to track down a copy of this for quite some time, and as it turns out, it's a lot harder than I expected. Copies on Discogs are currently selling for like $30 minimum, even more from other sellers. So I kind of figured it was going to be one of those CDs that I was just unfortunately going to have to spend a lot of money on. But not only did Amoeba Berkeley have a copy, which I was stoked to find, but it was only $20, which is significantly cheaper than the listings I'd seen. So at long last, I finally have a copy of this CD. It's been a long time coming, and I'm very stoked to finally own this CD. Next up, I have another thing I've been looking for quite some time. This is the Units album, Digital Stimulation. The Units were an incredible San Francisco synth punk band with a ton of awesome songs. I already own a compilation of their stuff that has all of those iconic tracks. But this is cool because this is their debut studio album that they recorded sometime in 1980. A lot of the songs that are on here are also on the compilation that I own, except they sound different than the compilation. My guess is they had recorded different versions over the years. I'm not entirely sure. But either way, I am so stoked to finally have found this album. So this one has also been kind of a long time coming. Next up, I have some post-rock. This is a Godspeed You Black Emperor album. I've just been slowly collecting this band's discography over the years. I love this band, and I especially love the most recent album they put out. It's one of my top 10 favorite albums of 2024. Coupled with the fact that I'm also in a post-rock band that is pretty influenced by Godspeed, their music has just been clicking with me lately. I've owned their first 2 albums for quite some time, and I think for most Godspeed fans, those are the band's best records. But I've slowly been adding their other albums to my collection, mostly because I haven't really listened to them as extensively, and I just want to have them. I remember when this one came out, I thought the cover looked cool, but I didn't listen to it for whatever reason. It's kind of daunting to dive into a Godspeed album because usually the songs are like 20 minutes a piece, and they're all really dense and heavy and kind of dreary and depressing. But overall, their music is still very beautiful, and it's some of the best post-rock out there. So I'm happy to add this one to the collection as well. Next up, I got a Barn Owl CD. This is actually a live album recorded at the Berkeley Art Museum. I love these guys. They are yet another San Francisco experimental group. Some of their stuff varies from sounding kind of doomy and guitar forward, while others sound more droney and electronic and ambient. But this one I've actually never listened to. I thought the cover looked very cool and abstract, and I also like the fact that it is recorded in Berkeley. The packaging kind of looks like it's an unofficial release. This might even have just been put out by the band themselves. I'm not entirely sure. But either way, I really like this band, and I think this one should be a very interesting listen. Next up, I have a Windy and Carl split CD with a band called Landing. I love Windy and Carl. They make some of my favorite ambient, space rock, post-rock, whatever you want to call it. Just very, very, very pretty music. They're also one of the leading bands in the Michigan space rock scene, which I had no idea existed until I started listening to Windy and Carl's works. There's a lot of groups that formed in the 90s that came out of Michigan, all doing very similar sounding stuff, which is just incredible. And though Landing is from Connecticut, their music still sounds very, very, very similar to Windy and Carl. So I just had to get it because I love stuff like this, and I could always use more ambient music in my collection. Next up, I have yet another split, but we're going back into post-rock. This is a Jesu split with Battle of Mice. Very, very excited to have found this. I love Jesu, but I especially love the band Battle of Mice. Phenomenal, yet very disturbing sounding post-metal. They only ever made one record, but it is one that is worth listening to. The only other studio recorded material they have was on this split, which I'm excited to have found, and now I have everything by Battle of Mice. And also, again, Jesu is cool. Next up, I have something from the 20th Century Avant-Garde section. This is a Terry Riley CD. I'm a big fan of this guy, and I especially love his ambient minimal works that he's done. A Curved Rainbow is easily his best work. And this is one I believe sounds similar to that, which I'm very excited to hear. I know he has a lot of other works that are more jazzy, a little more traditional, classical sounding. Not really my cup of tea, but this is the kind of stuff I love. I love the electronica stuff. Next up, I have an album by a group called Exuma. This is just aptly titled 2. This is a crazy band from the Bahamas that has equally crazy album art. I have their first album already, which is a stellar listen. And this is the follow-up album to that, which I did not know existed and have never heard before, so I just had to get it out of principle. I imagine it's going to sound pretty similar to the first album, which I'm okay with because I loved that one. Moving into more I-rock, next up I have a band called Salty Dog. African Zamrock, gotta love it. Have never heard of this band, but took a chance on it just because, why the hell not? This little blurb basically sold the album for me. Zamrock / African Psych from 1976 for fans of Witch, Aminaz, and other Afro-Psych I-rock. Yeah. Total winner. Moving right along to Ashra's album Blackouts. This is one I'm really stoked to have found. The main guy from this band is this guy Manuel Gottschling, who has put out tons and tons of stellar records as his own name, as well as variations of Ashra. I have a couple of those Ashra albums. Some vary from sounding like space rock to funky to ambient experimental. If I'm not mistaken, this is more spacey guitar ambient stuff, which I'm a huge fan of. I've never seen a CD copy of this album in the wild before, so I was very stoked to find it at Berkeley. Okay, moving on to a bunch of Japanese stuff. This is something I don't know anything about. I bought it because I thought the abstract art on the front and on the back looked really cool. And it's also on the label Psychedelic Speed Freaks, which puts out tons and tons of fantastic Japanese freaky sounding music. Another gamble I'm taking, but again, something I'm very looking forward to exploring. Next up, this is an artist called Doji Morita. This is their album Goodbye. Kind of has a similar aesthetic to that last album, albeit I think this is actually going to be a more singer-songwriter folky sounding album. Definitely not put out by Psychedelic Speed Freaks, but that's okay, because I'm still intrigued. I'll admit I'm kind of a sucker for obscure Japanese albums, especially if they were released in the 80s and 90s. So yeah, yet another gamble, but should be a fun listen nonetheless. Next up, I got two by the same band. This is the Far East Family Band. So I found this one in the iRock New Arrivals section and thought the cover looked insane. Looked it up on Discogs and saw it described as disco and psychedelic rock, which I had to get it because of that. And there was another Far East Family Band CD that Berkeley had available, so I just got that one too, just because. Both have stellar album artwork, and I'm very excited to explore these ones. Next up, I have another thing that I'm really excited to have found. This is a Keiji Haino Boris collaboration album. I'm a huge fan of Keiji Haino. I've probably expressed that numerous times in various videos. And what I really like about him is he will work with virtually anyone. He's done so many great collaborations with guys like Lauren Massacane Connors and Jim O'Rourke and Sumac. But I had no idea that he made an album with Boris, who is an equally stellar Japanese rock band. This is probably going to be insanely chaotic, but I am so looking forward to hearing how it sounds. I'm sure it's going to be heavy. There's probably going to be a lot of Keiji screaming and screeching, but it'll be really fun to experience. Okay, the last things I have for you today, these are all things that I just took chances on. I don't know anything about them, so we'll go through them fairly quickly. Trance to the Sun, Bloom Flowers Bloom. Got this because the cover looked cool, and it has a recommendation sticker by an employee, which is usually a good sign. Did a quick search of it on Discogs, saw that it was described as ethereal, dream pop, and gothic rock, so I was immediately sold. And then we have a Lycia album that I don't know anything about. I just know that they are also very dark and gothic, but very dreamy sounding. And I also know that this is the band's first album, so I decided, let's get that. They had another album or two available at the store, but I decided to get the first one to start from there and just see where that would take me. And then finally, I have two more by the same band. This is a group called Terminal Cheesecake, which I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw the band name, I was not entirely sure how I felt about them, but there was something about the covers of both of these CDs that just captivated me, so I put them in my basket and I walked around with them, and when it came down to the sifting process, they ended up making the cut because I looked them up on Discogs, and they were described as psychedelic dub, which is not what I was expecting, because with a name like Terminal Cheesecake, I would have thought they were like a 90s jam band like Dave Matthews or the String Cheese Incident. But I did some quick sampling, and I liked what I heard, and again, because I'm just feeling impulsive, and I'm exploring, and just wanting to get stuff, I got both of these. I'm hoping it's all dubby and psychedelic as Discogs has described them to be. I'm kind of picturing them as sounding similar as the band De Facto, which I really like, but we will have to see. I'm not sure what to expect, but should be fun nonetheless. Okay, that's all of it. I did it. I went through all of it. Such a long recording. I need to drink some water. That'll do it for me, Internet. Thank you all so very much for sticking around and watching. If you liked what you saw, then please consider hitting that subscribe button. It'll show me the support, and I'll love your face for it. And hey, if you have been on some big shopping sprees lately and came home with a bunch of stuff, let me know what you got. I would love to hear about it in the comment section down below. Oh, and you can also follow me on Instagram for even more music. I post a new album on there semi-frequently, talk a little bit about it, and it gives you a bit of an insight of what else is in my collection. Thank you all so much for listening to me ramble. I have a big mess I need to clean up, and then I'm gonna go to bed because this video was a lot, took a lot out of me, and I'm tired. I'll see you guys in the next video. Until then, this is Olin from What I'm Listening To signing out. Goodbye.